Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. I worked really hard on my timing on that one. The show where every Friday night at 7 o'clock Central, we want you to call in and tell us what you believe and why. And as usual, every Friday, we have a very special guest with us. And tonight is no exception. Tonight, we have Brenda from the God is Gray channel. Hello. You got you're muted on there. Can we hear you? Okay, well, we're going to get to that in a second. We want to talk about this month. This week is the last week of Theist Month, the month where every week we've had a theist guest. We wanted to talk about some of the differences in opinion that we have, but even though we have those differences in opinion, there's a lot of cases that we're fighting on the same side. And epistemological issues aside, which absolutely we should talk about and get to, we also want to talk about where we agree and the fights that we have in common. So when I was looking for guests, I was combing through YouTube and trying to find people who we could have on here that we will end up fighting on the same side, even if we don't start out there. And on the God is Great podcast, most people who've seen me on ACA shows will know that I do most of my work with nonprofits, the political and social arm of the show. Welcome back. And I saw that Brenda's work very, very closely mirrors a lot of the work that we do. So, Brenda, tell us a little bit about you and your podcast.
It's just funny you say it that way because I get that accusation from evangelicals a lot, just being like, just become an atheist. You clearly are, because we do share a lot of the same values, especially when it comes to social justice and compassion and understanding people of other perspectives, which is unfortunately not a common Christian trait nowadays. So anyway, my channel is called God is Gray, where I advocate for sex positive, LGBTQ affirming, science believing faith.
Okay, so for those in the audience who are new to the term, what makes a progressive Christian progressive? Is it really just the stances on those issues? And what is the biggest difference other than that you can think of between progressive Christians and evangelicals?
Well, I've really been laughing to myself about this progressive versus evangelical argument because evangelicals are known for their black and white ideologies. And when I say they, I clump myself and my history into that because I became an evangelical when I was 12 years old. And I stayed in that faith practice until I was about 27. So I spent a good chunk of my formative years completely hook, line, and sinker for all evangelical theology. And I was one of the champions of that particular brand of Christianity. So when I started questioning things and really leaning into the reality of the cognitive dissonance I was experiencing, I called it my prodigal son journey, because in my church and in many churches where I had been that were conservative, I wasn't permitted to ask questions or engage in my intellect or in my mind. Christians use certain little slurs and words to make fun of each other or to whip people back into place. So, for example, when I had cognitive dissonance about the reality of LGBTQ doctrine and what it has done and what kind of havoc it's wreaked on millions of people. And I present my dissension to church leaders. They called me a cherry picker. Whenever I would engage with sexuality questions or with my own sexuality, I was called a Jezebel. And so this prodigal son journey, quote unquote, I'm sure most people are familiar with the story, was just my exploration of the world, my diving into these questions and permitting myself to ask these questions away from my faith space where I was not permitted to ask any of them. So it's just hilarious to me because I started God is Gray in 2018, I think, if not 2019. It's been around for 3 years in February. And I did not have language of deconstruction, reconstruction, or progressive Christianity. It's like we named ourselves. We suddenly were like, oh, this is what we're about. And oh, this terminology feels right. This feels good. This is how I want to identify myself. And then as soon as evangelicals could grasp that new terminology, they're like, great, we'll attack that. Thanks for letting us know what to attack now. Because before they just had these vague insults. So I know I haven't answered your question yet, but the answer really is nobody really knows what progressive Christianity is. Progressive Christianity is where people land when they go on a deconstruction journey of all these toxic points of theology, where we dive in and figure things out, and we emerge and realize, oh yeah, I'm still Christian. I still ascribe to the teachings of Jesus. A lot of people that reconstruct as progressives believe in the classic atonement theory of Jesus dying for our sins and rising again, but not every progressive Christian believes that. So it's really hard to put your thumb on it. But essentially, I would say a progressive Christian is traditionally someone who had to deconstruct toxic theology and find a path out of that to a faith that actually aligns with what we believe the Bible says and what we actually believe Jesus was about on his time on earth.
Okay, so let me just play Jehovah's advocate here for a second. And thinking about what you said about how evangelicals will tend to think of things in very black and white. This is wrong, and it says this is wrong. Therefore, we're going to go with this is wrong. And it seems to me that if there is an objective morality, which they subscribe to, certainly they're going to say that there is a black and white yes or no. And so where does then progressive Christianity stray from that? Where do you take that? This is the structure that we were given. How do you begin to question that? And why do you begin to question that?
People have all different reasons for questioning it. In my memoir that I just wrote called On Her Knees, I really describe things as a pendulum. And I think a lot of people, or this is just the way I describe it to a lot of people, when you are in a certain faith practice that is really restrictive and not allowing you to actually be the person that God created you to be, you are held unnaturally so at the top of this pendulum. And it's the act of white knuckling it through life, trying to fit so hard into, you're the square peg trying to go into a round hole and you just won't fit. And that's a sensation I had for me, especially when it came to my sexuality and my womanhood, because I am a big communicator. I have leadership qualities. I believe that women should be permitted and not only permitted, but celebrated as leaders and as thinkers and as people that are on platform being honored as any pastor would be. So that was definitely a point of contention for me. I was always told too loud, talk too much, ask too many questions, not a woman, not a real woman, the way a woman's supposed to be in this supposedly biblical hierarchy. And then my other point of contention was about sexuality, because sex has always been incredibly important to me. I am now a certified sex educator, so I realize now that it was a passion that reached beyond just my desire to have sex, but also my desire to understand it and to educate others about it. So in that restrictive religion that held me unnaturally so at the top of this pendulum, what broke the pendulum was finding out that my husband had cheated on me. That was sort of the moment where I was given permission in myself to suddenly question everything that I'd been taught. Because in Christianity, or in evangelicalism specifically, I was given this narrative of a happily ever after. Just save yourself from marriage and be a perfect woman and cook and do all of these 1950s style things, and you will live happily ever after. I tried so hard to do all of that, and it failed me. The narrative wasn't true. It didn't protect me the way they told me that it would. So that was my reckoning. People have all different kinds of reckonings, though. People of color, Black people, their reckoning will often be realizing the white supremacist roots of our religion and how that harmful that has been. I have friends in the progressive space that are coming at it from their angles of trauma, really, from their angles of difficulty. Men who were, quote, soft boys or had to man up, that were just more artistic in their lean. Their reckoning has often been just realizing that they are allowed to be that they were made to be that way. So to answer your question, everyone has a different thing. For me, it was sexuality and womanhood.
So going back to then, you said you'd just written a book about this, and one of the my deconversion story is very bland and mundane. I was actually one of those who went through the logical arguments and looked through the Bible and said none of this makes any sort of sense whatsoever. I didn't have like a deconstruction. You know, the word that used now is deconstruction. That word didn't exist when I was going through my phases. So it was just a very gradual, you know, like you said, pendulum, right? But I didn't have a break moment. I just had that one moment where I looked at the Bible and said, none of this makes any sort of sense. The best way that this book makes sense is if people had wrote it trying to describe whatever they thought of God. And that's like the beginning and end of me. So to hear about deconstruction, this is something that I never experienced. So talk to us for a few minutes, if you could, about what exactly it means to deconstruct and then reconstruct one's faith.
Well, deconstruction has been a beautiful journey for me because, again, I didn't have the language, so I called it my prodigal son. And it was a complete shedding of everything. It was giving myself permission to dive into the depths of my desire, of my rebellion, you know, where you talk about like a Rumspringa or something. Like, it was kind of that for me because I really just had to shed everything that I had been told. And a huge part of deconstruction too is going back to the source of what you've been told. So I began tracing back a lot of these ideas that I'd been given and tracing them back to like my 23-year-old pastor, Scott, and then having a moment to ask myself the question, well, okay, so what was his source? Because he was a point of authority, of strength and truth when I was 12 years old. And now that I've surpassed him in age by far, you know, I'm like, this is where I'm getting this information. This is the person that has given me, quote, ultimate truth and the black and whites of the Bible. And now I supposedly know the ins and outs of God because of this evangelical experience at this single church. So a lot of it is just exactly as the word sounds, deconstructing these ideas, finding out the root source of where you got them. And that was just the beginning of my journey. And the most fun, exhilarating thing, and also a painful thing, has been deconstructing on the level of diving into theology and history. And one of my favorite theologians is Pete Enns. He talks about how the Bible is ancient, diverse, contradictory. And when people give you permission to look at it as it actually is, as it actually exists, as it actually was written, when you look at the patriarchal structures of why men believe they own our virginity in the first place, or why a hymen was supposedly proof of ownership over a woman, when you look at the ideas of white supremacy and you realize our nation is not that old and there is absolutely no way we've burned all white supremacy out of us and out of our systems, including the church. That is all deconstruction. And then when you get to like the bottom, at least that's how it works for a lot of people I've talked to, and that's how it worked for me, then you're kind of left there deciding where you're going to go and figuring out what is actually left and what is actually valuable to you. And so that is the reconstruction journey, which not everyone chooses to go on. Some people land in atheism. Some people land in agnosticism, which is the accusation I get a lot of times from these apologists like Alyssa Childers, who's always talking trash on progressive Christianity without talking to us. Alyssa, hit me up if you want to. But, you know, they're just like committed to not understanding. They're like, no, we're going to dig our heels in and not understand. And it's like, it's true. Some people end up agnostic. I did not. I am a progressive Christian, which means I am by definition not agnostic.
Oh, I wish I could talk to you for so much longer because you brought up a number of things there that I think we can dive deeper into. But let's take a look at this one first. In preparing for this show and learning more about progressive Christianity, I found a number of evangelical YouTube channels who, how do I put this nicely, wanted to throw in their 2 cents about what progressive Christianity is.
That's generous.
It is, and there was one where a very popular Christian apologist was talking to a progressive Christian, and no matter what theological stuff they talked about, they're like, okay, we can come to agreement on that. It turns out that the one thing that they could not come to terms with is, there's no better way to say it, sex related stuff. And that seems to be like their biggest LGBT acceptance. And you were talking about purity culture and other things like that. That's the big thing for, I can't say for all evangelicals, but for this one. And it's big enough that it needs to be addressed. So talk to us, please, a little bit more about the dangers that you saw in evangelical purity culture and what you're doing about it.
Yeah. So for anyone who's familiar, one of the most formative purity culture books of my time in the 90s was a book by Joshua Harris called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. I am honored and blessed to say that he had since denounced that book because a group of amazing women, I think one of them is Emily Joy, who also has a book of her own called Church Too. And I hope I'm right in thinking that's who started this movement, but they started a hashtag on Twitter called I Survived, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And suddenly Joshua Harris, who wrote one of the formative purity culture books at 21, was forced to reckon with the wreckage that this sort of theology had caused, not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of people. And if you watch a documentary, even like the New York Times Britney Spears documentary, that is essentially a story about purity culture, where they needed her, moms in the Midwest needed her to be a quote virgin and needed her to save herself to raise their daughters properly or something. Like, that is purity culture, and it's at work in our mainstream culture more than I think a lot of people would see it. So what I've done in my book, which Joshua Harris wrote the foreword for after denouncing his, is deconstructing all of those ideas of purity culture. And one thing I say in there is that the evangelical church built an idol out of sexual purity. And they absolutely did. When we are choosing the idol of our belief system, the idolatry of the Bible, the worship of our theology, those are all idols. That's the way I see it. And you can tell that they're idols because they wreak havoc on people's lives. And Christians will still determine, some Christians will still determine that they still chose the more important thing, which is the theology, the idol of purity, the idol of anti-LGBTQ doctrine. And it's all ironic and terrible as well, because the Bible says, look at the fruit. If we look at the fruit of this toxic theology, another friend of mine, Linda K. Klein, did 12 years worth of research on purity culture and its effects. And she found physiological responses in the body, vaginismus, erectile dysfunction, panic attacks. This theology manifests in your body, and that fruit, so to speak, is rotten. That is not flourishing in sexuality. That, to me, is not sexuality that is aligned with divinity and aligned with our highest selves. So now I feel like I've lost track of the question.
We were talking about purity culture, and you're talking about a number of wonderful things. And I suppose the question can be summed up by saying that, again, I'm playing Jehovah's advocate here and putting on my theist hat and wondering that there's a lot of this that sounds like progressive Christians just want to do whatever progressive Christians want to do and not have to deal with the sin aspect of it.
No.
So what's the response to that?
No, that's absolutely a fallacy that drives me bananas. To the contrary, my moral compass is on higher alert in my life than it's ever, ever, ever been as a progressive Christian. The reason being is because I don't have answers. I don't have black and white ideologies. I can't just point to a single out of context Bible verse and say, oh, well, this is why I get to disrespect you. This is why I get to dig my heels in and say you're a sinner. I actually have to reckon with what has happened when I speak a certain language or when I perpetuate a certain theology. And that was a part of my deconstruction too, facing the reality of the ways that I had hurt people with my theology and reckon with the truth of how many people I had pushed away from Christ because of it. Because I really was the banner purity culture queen. I organized a chastity ceremony at my church when I was 15 years old. I was the one who said that all of our fathers should sign this contract with us so we can wear our rings until we get married. So I was one of the purveyors of this toxic theology, and I have a lot of grace and space and love for people that do, because I know what it's like to believe that. But when you step into a space of deconstruction, reconstruction, progressive Christianity, and by the way, progressive Christianity is something that Alyssa Childers says, if there's one sacrament in progressive Christianity, it's deconstruction. That's a fallacy as well. We long, the progressive Christians I know, myself especially, long to create a world where our faith is not toxic and it doesn't have to be deconstructed, because it resides and it stands on a foundation of truth, on a foundation of love. And that is a very high calling, because suddenly I can't just disrespect people. And it's the same thing with my sexuality. I don't get to just go sleep around with whoever I want because my blinders aren't on anymore. I'm fully aware of autonomy, mutuality, of sexual integrity, of enthusiastic consent. And if one of those things is not at play in my sex life, then I don't believe I'm permitted to have sex. And that is actually a much higher bar than just try to only give BJs until you get married, which is where a lot of Christians are kind of residing. And also,
what is it? That's something else you brought up. That what is it? So many different bizarre and seemingly arbitrary how you're keeping your purity through your experimental years rules, like only holding hands for a certain amount of time during it. I don't know what other crazy stuff we came up with. A lot of the stuff you're saying is resonating, and that's why I was very happy to see that you were going to be on here. We don't have a lot of time. We're going to get to colors, and we're very happy to see the colors that are there. Please, if you have any questions for Brenda, or if you have any stories that you'd like to tell about your deconstruction, or if you have your usual Friday night claims about the supernatural, please give us a call. Numbers are right down there. Get in here. But okay, so I wouldn't be doing my job as an atheist, though, if I didn't just wonder, as much as you're disagreeing with evangelical Christianity, what's keeping you there? Help me understand this. Like you've already taken the Bible and you've already decided, okay, this is problematic at best. But something is still keeping you on. Help me understand why.
Okay, well, I don't see the Bible as problematic.
Okay.
I don't. It's problematic when we deify it. It's problematic when we say that we crystal clear understand it and that we can weaponize and abuse people with it. The human interpretation of the Bible can become very problematic. We can see it in the Crusades, and we can see it today in what we're doing to trans people, LGBTQ people, all of that stuff. It's weaponized. It's a sin. It's wrong. The Bible is actually a beautiful account of our forefathers and foremothers, and many of the mothers, their voices are omitted too. It is a book written with the lens of patriarchy. It has been translated and mistranslated. I just had a beautiful interview with Rocky Ruggiero. She is the director of the film 1946, which talks about when they just decided in 1946 to put the word homosexuality in there, in spite of evidence that showed that was an inaccurate translation. So I really blame mankind, and that's what keeps me there. This tenacity to help people really understand that God is not our enemy, that the Bible isn't even our enemy. This is a beautiful account of our history and our faith history, and it is infused with divinity. And I believe that as well. When the Bible says it's inspired, the inspired word of God, I absolutely believe that. But when you decide that means it's literal and you can take any word out of there to weaponize and hurt people, then that's when it's problematic. And what keeps me here is this irrational, hopeful, beautiful love for Jesus, who I cannot get out of my system. I love him.
If there was more time, there would be more questions, but we do have a queue full of callers. I want to get to as many of these callers as possible. Please keep calling in if you have any more questions, and we'll get to them in just a little bit. If you would like to support this show, one great way to do it is to go to our Patreon, patreon.com/truthwanted, because one of the benefits is that every week on the show, we're going to call out someone as our very own special patron of the week. So this week's patron of the week is, drum roll please, Keith Heath. Thank you very much, Keith. And thank you again to all our patrons and everybody who's here supporting the show. Well, Brenda, we've made it half an hour in. Are you ready to take some calls?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. This one is specifically for you, so I'm gonna start with Justin from Alabama. Justin, you here with us?
Hello.
Justin, you're on with Brenda. What do you want to ask?
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good. So, Brenda, nice to meet you. I have a lot of talks with a Christian friend of mine. I'm an atheist myself, but I grew up Southern Baptist, and very much know all the ins and outs of Christianity, having been in it for 26 years. And I would say the thing that's got me hung up right now, because we have open discussions, as in, everything's fair game. If you make a good point, then good for you or whatever. But we're not trying to necessarily change each other's minds. Well, he may be trying to change mine if he's a good Christian, I guess. Anyway, so my point of saying all that is that the point that I've come to with him is a point that interests me a lot, because, okay, let me ask you, Brenda, do you personally believe in the historicity, the truthness of the story of the flood? No, I'm just curious.
I told Puck before. Yeah, no, one of my favorite things, honestly, to say is I don't know. And I find that to be really empowering and keeps me in a state of curiosity. And I want to stay in that state of curiosity for my whole life. So I would love to engage with that with somebody. I would love to talk to somebody that actually, I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen evidence for it scientifically.
So, sure, that's a good answer. I mean, that was kind of always my thing as a Christian, and I'm not trying to trap you either. I'm just trying to. It's just something that I thought about, because I don't think I ever thought about the fact before that Jesus directly references the flood in Luke, and as if it were fact. I don't know if that's, I'm sure somebody could say that it was a parable, or he was just speaking to the truthness of the story in general, but it was used as a warning in Luke 17. And if we believe in the Trinity and the God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus all being one, then it would appear that Jesus, through God, believes in the flood, when I don't see how anybody could. And I think that I've never heard anybody really talk about that. And because specifically bringing up my friend, the reason why I brought him up is because he might say something, if I asked him about the flood, and you said, I don't know, and he would probably say the same thing. He'd say, I don't know. However, I do know that, I believe in what Jesus taught, and Jesus is the way, and this and that, and no matter whatever else is in that book. So it just kind of struck me as like, well, does it really matter too much what Jesus said if Jesus was clearly wrong about some things. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that was just my thought. And I'm not trying to, like I said, I'm not on the attack here. It's just, I forgot it was Theist month still, and I was going to ask a different question about parallel universes, but Dan, when I saw Dan was on, I was like, oh, I was going to ask about the flood, because anyway, I'm not trying to gotcha, type thing, but it's something that, like, I was always asking questions as a Christian, and I was always causing trouble. And for me, I'll say that ultimately I would just say, well, we're not supposed to know everything. It's in God's hands. And but on the way out, you tend to care more about what you can prove and what you can see for your own eye, with your own eyes. So anyway, I was just curious what your take was on that.
I'm kind of curious, because the question of how did Jesus view Old Testament teachings, that's fascinating in its own little way. And I think I'm going to earn some I'm going to earn some street cred with you, Brenda, because wasn't it one of your videos where you talked about one thing that Jesus did when it was preaching was he went ahead and said, okay, take all this stuff, throw it out. I got some new stuff for you, right? Like the whole eye for an eye thing. Okay, that's gone. I got something better for you. So was he aware of the theology? Probably. Did he have better things to say about it? Seems so. But what am I missing, Brenda?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's what's been so fascinating too, because one of the arguments is that we're not allowed to engage with the Bible with questions, that it just has to be our source of absolute truth. And then you encounter these moments where you realize Jesus engaged with the Torah, which is half of the Bible, in this very exploratory and sometimes breaking it open and making it brand new. And then even with things that Jesus said, disciples would chew on Jesus's words and try to reimagine or even have arguments and discussions in the Bible, in the text, about what Jesus meant by X, Y, or Z. So, I mean, I think that's a really fascinating question, Justin. And I'm just so grateful that you have this engagement with your friend that sounds so respectful and full of love. I think that's the best thing we could ask for. And you've just piqued my curiosity, because Jesus saying that about the flood really throws a wrench in it, because I describe myself as a science believing Christian. So when I don't see the scientific evidence for something, I'm prone to go with the science. And I more often realize that it actually illuminates something beautiful and new about God that I didn't consider, versus demolishing or hurting my faith in any way. But yeah, I got to research that more, because I'm like, I wonder if it happened on a smaller scale, or I wonder if it's something that's yet to be discovered. I have no idea. That's a great question.
No, I know the answer to this one. Jesus, because he was all-knowing, did know whether or not a flood happened, but had to speak to people in a way that they could relate to at the time. So whatever he was saying and speaking, he was talking about. Why am I not an apologist? I'm doing their job. I'm doing their job for them. Yes, but so the idea is he must present the information as if it was in the way that they could relate to whoever was listening to him there.
Whereas and if it was originally written as an allegory, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, if it's originally written as an allegory, that makes even more sense that he would be engaging with the allegory of it in that way. That's cool. I never thought about that.
This is the puck method, by the way, Justin, to try to understand why the other person finds this to be convincing or compelling. Because there are people who are smarter than me who are convinced of the opposite that I'm convinced of. Okay, and trying to understand why people find it convincing. I don't find it convincing, but it's great when people bring this up and try to figure out, why do you think this works as a model for historicity of Jesus, or what Jesus believed, or anything like that.
Right.
So that's really cool.
Right. Well,
go ahead, please.
At the core of it, I was just saying, we're talking about the flood, but at the core of it was really the general idea that my friend, much like what she just said here, is a science person. So I'll ask questions like, well, how do you figure, what do you think about evolution? Well, that's clearly real. I mean, at least to some extent. I'm like, yeah, okay, but like, what about the flood, or whatever. I don't know. It's Old Testament. And then if I say, what about the Ten Commandments? Yeah, of course we keep those. But my point is, I defer to what Jesus said. That's really all that matters to me. It just kind of, like, if that's the case, and I understand that it's different for everybody. Some people, I mean, there's as many different types of Christians as there are as many different Christians. So
Yeah.
I get that. But my point is, like, it just kind of struck me as like, well, what if we could, like, show that some things that he said were misguided at the very least,
In my experience, that's just going to vary so much from individual to individual. Because everybody holds, like you pointed out, everybody holds onto their individual theology, and what one person or one group believes about the accuracy or infallibility of the Bible is going to change. So, Brenda, what's your last take on this?
I mean, I do see Jesus I see him as perfect. So I guess I'm just prone to believe that he was engaging in an allegory in a way that would help them understand. But I just appreciate the dialogue, and it's got me intrigued and wanting to look into it more deeply.
Sure.
Keep the conversations going, Justin. Thank you very much.
Said too. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you for calling. Have a good night.
All right.
Well, it's nice that we do start off with a good call like that about, asking specifically about your beliefs and all that. But I think I want to take a call that's a little more on the standard vein for what Truth Wanted is. So Tralian, you're on with Puck and Brenda. What's up?
How are you?
Doing well.
Hello.
Well, here's the deal. I'm getting something out of this because I haven't been able to essentially communicate the event that happened in my life about 40 years ago up until now. And I felt it incumbent upon myself, not just for my sake, but for anyone else who may have had a similar experience or a related experience. In short, I'll try to be succinct so that I won't be so rhetorical. The matter has to do with an event that took place in a place called Co-op City in the Bronx. The picture of this is 5 football fields of buildings, about 33 floors, some chevron, some tricore they called them, and then there was a tower building which I lived in with my parents during that time period. I was in my 20s. There were 2 hallways, one in the back, one in the front, and instead of opting for the elevator, I would go through the staircase. We lived on the 3rd floor, apartment 3J. Across from the hall of my mother was Rose Stein. She was an elderly Jewish woman. She was in her 90s, and she passed away. She bequeathed some artifacts to her daughter, which in turn her daughter gave some artifacts to my mother. And I received a beautiful etched mirror with a reclining chair during that time period. I would go up the stairs, and I had been there for at least over a decade, so I knew every little sound in the hall, every little door that opened up, on the floors ahead, and things of that nature were just commonplace to me. The winds, the howling, the whole thing, okay? So on this particular occasion, there's 2 paranormal events that took place within 5 minutes of one another, and it's the reason I became an empiricist, so I'll just try to get past this. I was coming up the stairs on a particular occasion. She had passed away about within less than 5 days, and I had the artifacts in my room. When I got to the platform on the 3rd floor, I heard an utterance that I had never heard before. It was unlike anything that I had ever heard, and I sensed a presence. Kind of dismissed it because, you could say it's delusional, it's delirium. Outside of the human psyche, you have to say, okay, well, maybe it is a hallucination to some degree, okay? Which is what I would have thought originally.
Okay, Tralian, I want to make sure that we're not, like, there's a lot of questions I already have, and I know that there's still more to the story, and I don't want you to feel like I'm interrupting, but if I don't start asking questions now, then we're going to lose it. So, one more time, you had a presence you felt a presence that was saying something that was audible to you, or just a voice that you heard like in your head? Just clear that up for me.
No, this is an extra sensory occurrence that
Extra
happened audibly in the hall. Not
Extra
in the mind,
sensory, but
in the
audibly,
hall.
so with your ears.
Yes, audibly in the hall. Yes. Okay, so
Okay.
when I went past the door, I went into the apartment, walked down the hall. We lived in a 2-bedroom. Stein lived in a 1-bedroom. I went to the bathroom. Now, here's where the kicker happens.
Okay.
When I went into the bathroom, I flipped on the light switch, and within a moment, now just let me preface this, above the mirror, there is a fixture that all the apartments get. It's a metal fixture with a glass housing. It houses over the bulb. This is in all the apartments, as I said. When I flipped the light switch on, within a moment, the glass housing over the bulb left the wall like a missile. It launched itself, hit the other side of the room, bounced off of my mother's wicker hamper, and I managed to grab it before it hit the floor. I went and tried to put the housing back on, but the screws were tightened down and I could not get it on. I had to loosen the screws to get the glass housing back on.
Okay.
That is
Could you remind me how long ago this was?
about 40 years.
40 years. And do you
I have
still?
not gotten it ever since.
Oh, so you haven't, you don't live
So
there
what I'm
anymore. You don't
gathering-
live there. Okay.
Right, so what I'm gathering here is that, now if you want to take a scientific platform to this, in 1995, Bob Williams from NASA put the Hubble telescope into the central part of space. They numbered about 2,500 objects moving at superluminal speed. Now, according to Einstein, that's impossible. So what I conclude about this, and I'm not saying that this is a fact of what actually happened,
Sure.
but whatever that thing was, I don't know what the hell it was, but whatever it was, had to be moving beyond the speed of light. In order for those screws and that glass to have passed through one another, the laws of physics had to break. This is my point for today because this is what this is the reason that I'm calling, because I'm giving this to you point blank for anyone who is going to get something out of this. I mean, whether you do or not, I can't say. All I know is that this is what happened, and I had felt it incumbent on me as far as mankind to report it.
Okay, so Tralian, work with me here for a second because we're going to see if we can puck this out together. This was it sounds like it was either a one-of or extremely rare occasion. I'm understanding this just kind of happened once, or is this something that frequently occurs around you?
Oh my gosh, no. I hope
Okay.
it never happens again. It's scary.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, so now the problem that we have with a one-of is that there's really no way to go back and meaningfully investigate it, right? So I validate the fact that you had this experience and this is the conclusion you come to of it. You'll have to forgive me, though, for not being able to come to the same one, because really all I have to go by is what you're saying. And no, I don't think that you're like being intentionally deceptive,
Let me put
just
it
that there's
this
no
way.
way for me to go
If
back
you
there and
come
try to
the end
figure
of
out.
your life, and
What's
you're
that?
about to leave this world, what should a man be conceived as if not for the preeminence of the incorporeal? Because you see, without that, there is no justice, and everything becomes futile.
Okay, so that's a completely
you
different
realize-
can of worms. We will get to the purpose of life and the futility of no justice in a moment. But let's go back
The
to
purpose of life fits into this. Okay, well, go ahead. Let's shrink it down
Okay.
to what you were talking about.
yeah, because like with no way to go back here and meaningfully investigate this, there's no way that I'm going to be able to go and
You're
say.
coming to a conclusion. I would never come to a conclusion because that rules out the possibilities of what might be missing from the equation.
Except you did, didn't you? You already said that it must have been traveling faster than the speed of light, right? And you call to evidence some Hubble findings about something
okay.
moving fast.
Hypothetically, the only way that I can see that, because otherwise the glass would have broke and the screws would have been bent or something would have been damaged, but nothing was damaged.
Are you leaving room for the possibility that it could have been something else?
Sure.
Okay.
But the point I'm trying to make to you is whatever happened there had to break the laws of physics, because there's no way that could have happened unless something did.
Well, the other thing that
the
immediately
thing
comes to
is-
mind is that it's not remembered what actually happened is not remembered in the way that it actually happened, which that seems to be a reasonable explanation also.
I think that's an insulting statement because, first of all, I had all my senses then just as much as
No. Whoa. Let's make this clear. Let's make this clear.
man.
I am not
I really
saying
am
that
not
you
going to
are.
be-
Whoa, hold on. Stop. I am not at all
But I don't
saying
have
that you are
my
lacking in your faculties. Hold on, I got to talk
I
about
just
this. I am not at all saying that you are lacking in your faculties. We all remember things very differently sometimes than what happened. Okay, this can happen to anyone in any circumstance. Okay, by no means, and I apologize if this is how it came across. By no means am I saying that you are deficient in your faculties. By no means was I trying to indicate that you were hallucinating or anything. Just that how you present it may and how you remember it may not be the same as what actually happened. So I apologize. Now let's move on from there. Okay, so yes. So now with all that said,
Hey, listen. Okay, first of all, I don't like being spoken at. Secondly, my faculties are just as aware as I was back then, even more so because I'm a senior citizen, and I don't appreciate being told that maybe the story has changed in my mind. Okay? I'm telling you this point blank for your sake just as much as everybody else that lives in this world temporarily. Because when you reach the point where you're ready to leave this world, a lot of these things that you may not consider to be important will become very important to you. And that's the reason I'm speaking to you. I don't care about your atheism or people that believe in God, because to me, that's irrelevant. What I'm telling you now is that there is a way to live beyond this world. And that's what you need to look at. Because I don't know how old you are, but a lot of people die of a lot of different things in this world. And we have to have the justification for that somewhere down the line. Whether mankind's technology rises people back, whether we go back through time travel, whatever we do, we cannot cease to exist simply on a whim. So all I'm telling you is when that occurred to me, I realized that Rose Stein may have been that person, maybe not. Maybe she was a ghost, maybe not. I don't know what the hell it was. But whatever it was existed. Okay. So that's what I'm trying to purport to you. If it helps you, good. If it doesn't, well, you'll have to be the atheist until you reach that point where you'll realize that your existence is vital. Because everything that you think, everything that you feel will become non-existent if you don't think that something will happen where you will be able to survive it. Your entire life will be a waste.
Well, thank you very much for.
Hold
on, I think Brenda had a question. Why would my life be a waste? Why would our lives be a waste?
Because
what was Brenda's question?
Exist. If you go to the point where everything you've learned, everything that you know, comes to nothing, the hero and the villain come to nothing. The people who died victimized, the people who victimized them, they all come to the same non-existence. You're crazy.
Okay,
Nothing
so
is impossible. That's why everything exists.
So thank you very much for that take. And now I'm going to give you my take, whether or not you take it or leave it or not. On a long enough timeline, according to the movie Fight Club, on a long enough timeline, everybody's survival rate is 0. You're probably true. And the things that I do tomorrow may not affect the vast majority of people on this world. I remember a story about a boy who was walking down a seashore. And as he's walking down, because it's low tide, he sees a lot of starfish in the tidal pools there. And these fish, they will die if they're caught there. So he walks down the beach, takes them one by one, throws it back into the ocean so that they have a chance at survival. This man is watching this boy and saying, why are you doing this? There's hundreds of starfish on this beach alone. Never mind the hundreds of beaches everywhere else in the world. How could you possibly think you're making a difference? And the boy picks up another starfish, throws it into the ocean and said, you know what? It made a difference to that one. So if you are saying that there is no ultimate purpose, therefore everything that I am doing is for no good reason at all, we're done. We're done having this conversation. I appreciate your input, Brenda. If you have anything else.
I mean, yeah, I know. I just agree with you. I have a lot of compassion for whatever a difficulty you're having with not feeling validated in your experience, and at the same time to make that mean that everyone else's experience is invalid or that you cannot still have a positive impact. Even if, I mean, for me too, I am not atheist. I do not believe it ends at the end of life. But hypothetically, if that were true, I still don't see how your life would be meaningless, because if you output love, Puck, if you did positive things to change the world for the better, even in your small pocket of your friends, family, whatever, if you start recycling, whatever actions you take to be a really good, love-oriented person in this life would have ripple effects that would go on for centuries, for all you know. I mean, positive impact during our life is invaluable, is my belief, regardless of your theology or what you believe happens in the afterlife.
And this is one of the biggest places where you and I are going to really shake hands, Brenda, because there are a lot of believers who will say that what happens in this life doesn't really matter too much. This is a staging ground for where you're going to end up next, which is so much better and eternal on top of that, right? So this leads to all sorts of really bad decisions, like let's not bother taking care of our planet.
Exactly.
Right, because this planet is what is it? What's the word? Fallen. This is a fallen world anyway, right? It's and so who cares about what happens here? Who cares about people who, in your opinion, are sinners, because they will get their the comeuppance. So we might as well start making it miserable for them anyway. No.
Yeah. A lot of theological people have that attitude, and it is gravely harmful to society, to our planet, to everything. I was in an interview once where a woman kept saying, "This is not our home. This is not our home." And I was like, so you just get to rampage around and do whatever you want because you're going somewhere else? Well, what about all the generations that are coming after you? At least care about them if you don't care to live your own life here.
Yeah, no, you don't even have to go to an afterlife to realize there are going to be people like we're leaving this world for someone else, right?
Yeah.
We're leaving a mess for someone else to clean up. And the better I can leave my space for whoever is going to occupy it next. I agree. Like if you look at a timeline that extends to millions of years, my actions tomorrow may not be significant, but it's going to be significant to the people who are on this planet immediately after I am. That's what I'm going to keep fighting for. And I appreciate that you and I are on the same team on that.
Yeah, I was out of the loop, so I didn't understand the vitriol. Except I guess it's just because you're an atheist.
Oh no, it's not worth going back over. It's on there. I kind of lost my pucks as soon as he suggested that anything about purpose, but we can move on from there. We do have a call.
Okay.
I want to take this call from Nate, because this is for you as a progressive Christian. Nate, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here. Hey,
hello.
Puck.
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call.
What question do you have for Brenda?
All right. So I first of all, I just want to preface my question by saying that I absolutely love what you guys are doing here. I think that constructive conversation with progressive Christians is so important. We need to focus more on the vast multitude of the things we do agree on instead of getting hung up on the few things that we might not agree on.
Mm-hmm.
And have these conversations. So this is awesome. But I do have a question for you. And that is, how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile that Jesus might have given some bad advice? Puck kind of touched on this earlier with the whole eye for an eye thing from Matthew chapter 5, where it says, "You've heard eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. They slap you on the right cheek, turn them the other cheek. If they want to take your shirt, hand over your coat," which I think is spectacularly bad advice, right? Like we've seen this. Neville Chamberlain learned this lesson in the events leading up to the Second World War, right? We must stand up to bullies, and we must defeat evil ideologies and evil men, right? The only thing required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. I think that's far better advice than what's found in Matthew. So I'm just wondering, do you agree? And how do you deal with parts of Jesus's teachings that you might not necessarily agree with?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Nate. I don't disagree with anything Jesus said, and I do not see that message as passive at all. Jesus was someone that was not afraid or wary of coming to those in power and disrupting their system. And he was tortured and murdered because he had messages that were so confronting to the powers that be, so confronting to, you know, like when you brought up the point of, you know, there's nothing worse than when a good person does nothing. Like we need that, I butchered that quote, but
You were close enough. Close enough.
yeah, I paraphrased it terribly, but you know what I'm saying. But Jesus was not a pacifier in that way. He was always shaking things up, turning over tables in the temple. He wasn't afraid of conflict and of charging head first. But at the same time, what I think that message did was offer an alternative to revenge. I really do believe that war is a stain on society. I know that it's necessary in the world that we exist in, that unfortunately, because we live in these systems, because we live in what a lot of Christians would call a fallen world, which is something that I would refer to as just a world that exists in dark and light polarities, where we are confronting some really dark, deep issues, where we have very serious conflicts with other nations, with other people, etc. So, but at the same time, I see that as a complete stain. And I understood, or I believe I understand why Jesus was a peacemaker in that way, because I don't believe there is a morality around actually going forth and causing that sort of like war. And my goodness, I'm realizing I'm stepping into some really deep territory, because I am not trying to say anything negative about our service people and all of the beautiful work they have done to keep us safe. Like I said, war to me and these conflicts are a necessary evil of this world. But when I read that passage, what I read is just an alternative to the way things are usually done within our own selves. You're not turning your cheek to be abused. You're not turning your cheek to be taken advantage of, but you are turning your cheek in that you are always choosing love. And I really believe that's what he was saying, because the crux of his message was always that you're choosing love. You're loving yourself, you're loving others, and you're loving God. But love comes with boundaries. Love implicitly has walls put up to make sure that you are not harming, that you're not outputting harm. Harm is not a part of love. I don't know that I'm describing this properly, but it's just interesting that you brought that up, because that is a verse that is definitely, I think, just been misunderstood. And I don't know if what I'm saying is resonating with you at all, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that the love is the most important part, and disrupting the system of someone does something to you, you get automatic revenge. I really think that what Jesus was trying to say is we're not enacting like that. We're not seeking revenge all the time. We are being more thoughtful, and we are being giving when we can, and we're choosing love. Any
So
good of an answer?
If I missed this the first time,
No,
Nate, please let
that
me
is
know.
fair,
But
although the wording of the verse is do not resist an evil person. It's not really about revenge, right? And I am ex-military, and so I do agree with you that war is something that should be avoided at all costs, because it's terrible. But sometimes it is required. It is necessary. And the message here that I get, right, do not resist an evil person, that's what it says. It doesn't say anything about revenge, right? It just says give them your coat, let them slap you, let them beat you up, right? Like that's the message to me.
I have
So
to, I would love
how you read that, and then you take to me, again, I don't mean to come at you here. I think you're great, and I love this content, but it seems like you're reading it and just kind of taking the answer that you want out of it, instead of taking it at face value for what it actually says.
So you think that it's saying that we are to just lay down and allow evil to happen to us, is what Jesus was saying?
It says, do not resist an evil person. So yeah, that's kind of what I take from it.
I mean, it's totally fair that we would have different interpretations, and that of course is the complication of the Bible always. I really do believe whatever lens you're looking at it through, and whatever life experience you have, etc., is always going to lead into or bleed into the way you interpret certain things in the Bible. When I read it, which maybe isn't fair, and I would love to look at the original text and research that and see what it said in the original. But even with that, I still see it as like a posture and an attitude inside of himself, not necessarily commenting on laying down, because the rest of Jesus's life did not at all mirror someone that was passive, that laid down, that allowed evil to happen. He went to his death, he submitted to that, but even that he did to me with so much power and grace and confidence in what he was doing and what sort of message was being brought across by that act. So for me, it's just more about not ingesting that harm, not engaging in it all the time, not engaging with, quote, evil people or people that have ill motivations that are trying to harm you, that you're not bowing to that and allowing that to be a part of your life. For me, and maybe it's not right, to say this is the actual interpretation, but I interpreted it as, if someone is in need, if someone is doing something, quote, sinful, which to me is like someone is coming at you trying to steal something from you. The way I see it is, it's just like, don't engage with it. Don't just like lead your whole life dependent upon how you are engaging with people that are doing negative things. Just give your code. Just believe in the resource of things coming back around to you. But again, I think it's completely fair that you could look at me and be like, this chick is just picking and choosing what sounds good to her. And I think the only like most solid argument I have is that just the rest of Jesus' life doesn't mirror or show us someone that was completely passive in every situation. He was a warrior in many ways.
So Nate, if I could step in here really quick, because you in the call screening notes, I noticed that you put up a chapter in the Bible, and I looked that up while you and Brenda were talking. And in this chapter, there's a lot of fascinating things about Jesus being a wedding planner, and about there's a lot of stuff in here. And as much as I've read through the Bible and the Gospels, I always find something new every time I read through here. And this is one of the biggest problems that I have, because no matter what kind of Jesus you want, you can find that kind of Jesus. Okay, you can find the kind of Jesus that says, what you said, or you can find the kind of Jesus that says, no, totally, you misunderstood that part. And I think what Brenda said had a lot of weight, that you're going to look at these stories, these parables, the entire Bible through a certain lens, and that lens is going to alter how you're going to receive the message and what you're going to get out of it. So when you said,
I liked what Brenda said, that the rest of Jesus's life doesn't really jive with the message of that particular test. And I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? Is like, aren't you just kind of choosing to get out of it what you want to get out of it? And if that's the case, why do you need the Bible, right? It seems to me you're arriving at a perfectly valid, perfectly moral system all on your own. So why do you need Jesus?
I mean, I definitely am a believer that people have a very strong sense of morality if they choose to, if they are engaging in a life where they are leaning into that. Like Puck, for example, before this recording, we're talking about the thing that we have in common is this desire that we share to make the world a better place. I've met terrible atheists, I've met terrible Christians, and just as, reading the Bible, you can glean out of it what is resonant with you or what you want it to say, even if you have ill motivations. It is there like putty. It really is. And that's why I think doing this due diligence of learning more about theology and the history of it and the writings of it, because, for example, the fact that there's not one chapter in there that's been written by a female voice, that to me just is proof right there that it is a messy text that is probably not completely divinely oriented, because it is still messy and complex, and it has its contradictory moments, absolutely. And would I bank my life that every single thing that's written in there as Jesus's words were actually words that came out of his mouth, that it's actually been perfectly written? No, I'm not confident of that, because I don't trust mankind to have a text like this that holds so much power over people and to properly interpret it and properly give it to us the way we deserve. So for me, I even feel remiss answering this question, because I know that I have not educated myself on the original text and what it said. And you've gotten me curious about, oh, that's a very interesting line you're pointing out. Like, what did it originally say? Have the translators done us dirty, or is that actually what he said? And you've just left me with more questions.
Greek, and we'll do a video together.
That sounds great.
I love it. Collaboration ideas. You know, we got to move on. I want to run the table here and get to all the calls. But Nate, thank you very much for calling. That led to a lot of great conversation.
Yeah,
appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you. The world needs more Christians like you. Thanks for taking my call.
You.
Wow, a high five from the caller there.
I know. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I messed that up, but I'm trying my best.
No, you no. I think this is fantastic. We have let's talk to Keith from Florida next. Keith, how you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing, fucking Brenda?
Not too shabby, thank you.
It's a good night. Got plenty of orange soda. I'm into this. I'm in. All right, what do you want to ask about tonight?
Well, hey, so I've been thinking a lot about conversations with atheists and theists. You know, it's too easy to just point at one side or the other and just say, you bad. And I think that talking about how we talk about things is important. One of the things I've been thinking about recently is, I think that, and I'd like both of your perspectives on this, I think that as atheists, pointing at theists and saying, God of the gaps is a bad argument, is not a great thing to do, because when the thing that's bad about God of the gaps is that or at least the thing that everyone says is bad about God of the gaps is that it stops people from looking into things. But if you're saying, oh, you can't say that, that's a God of the gaps fallacy, then you're stopping the conversation. What do you guys think?
Okay, I think I get what you're talking about. I mean, I like calling it out if that's what's actually being used. If somebody is actually using a God of the gaps fallacy, like, well, how else do you explain the beginning of the universe? How else do you explain evolution? That is textbook God of the gaps fallacy, right? Now, does it shut down the conversation? Yes, it does. And so I would point out the fallacy and then move on to why that fallacious thinking is problematic. So not just ending it there, but then leading into the next one. It's like, okay, well, here's some other things. Did you consider this? You know, have you read the research that they have on this? And then, of course, bringing up that if you have the answer, if you think you know that God is the cause of this, you stop asking the important questions, and we don't make any more important discoveries that we've figured out because we kept on asking the questions. Right. So I see it. I see it in that sense of you call out the fallacy, say why it's fallacious in thinking, but then continuing the conversation from there. Brenda, counter apologetics. What's your take?
Help educate my ignorance. What is the God of the gap fallacy?
Roughly stated, the God of the gaps fallacy is by saying that there's something that we cannot explain using our current understanding. Therefore, God must have done it. For example, the origin of the universe, the beginning of life, the source of morality. There's a lot of places where this is used.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. But then the question was,
is this a good idea to use with theists? Because would that shut down the conversation? If you gave your thesis on why God exists, and it included some of these arguments, and a really scummy, evil atheist like me came in and says, you're just using the God of the gaps fallacy. What does that do to you as far as wanting to continue to engage with them?
I mean, this is why I'm unique in my faith practice, and I know it doesn't satiate the most curious of people, especially when it comes to apologetics and theology. Like, I'm very open about not being a theologian and not having all of the answers and being on a serious journey of discovery. So I've never been interested in having these arguments or trying to prove my God. And I think when people get into those conversations, or if they lead into an argument, it does kind of just feel like a game of chess, because then it's like, well, who, or even checkers actually sometimes, because it's just like, well, who ran out of chips? Someone ran out of them and now the game's over. You know, it can only go as far as your knowledge, which is why, you know, sometimes it would be difficult for, or a lot of times, atheists know so much more about theology than I do. And I just don't have enough chips to play the game because I just don't. But at the same time, so I guess I'm broadly answering that I think, yes, it does shut down the conversation in a way, because it's like, it's an ending, it's a period. It says, and boom, mic drop, like, this doesn't work. That argument doesn't work. But this is the answer for me too, is that's why I don't really engage in those kinds of conversations, because they often don't get anywhere. I love talking about heart and mind and soul and intellect and what's going on in someone's life. And I'm sorry if that answer doesn't satiate you, Keith, but that's just kind of where I come from as a theist.
Actually, it leads me to another question, actually, if you don't mind.
Sure, we got a little time.
Or do you have a... Okay. So you say that these conversations are like checkers, and when people run out of chips, you know, they have to stop playing. But I like to propose an alternate view on these types of conversations. I think that they are like the journey that you're talking about. You know, it shouldn't be argued and fought to win. It should be, let's have a conversation and help each other to further along our own journeys. Instead of the angry atheists, let's be angry, Kalam argument's bad. I love the Kalam argument, by the way.
Oh, okay. You gave me a face palm on that one. That's okay. No, and like, I find counter apologetics interesting as much as the next guy, but where I come from, and again, this is my personal bias, and I acknowledge it, is that I want to have the conversation where, how do these beliefs impact and hurt people that are going on right now in real life, right? Like, we can talk about the flaws of the ontological argument, or we can talk about misrepresented minority populations and try to find the best way to make sure that they're represented, and talk about the problems that we're having in current society. Brenda and I have a lot of agreement on a lot of these problems and a lot of great ways to solve it, regardless of the fact that we land in different places when it comes to apologetics. So for me, apologetics are fascinating conversations to have, but at the end of the day, I want to start solving actual problems that are going on here, rather than trying to figure out the how do they put it, the necessary preconditions for the intelligibility of the universe. That's just me.
Well, Keith, I love the way you're framing this too, because to me, you're just indicating this openness and this. It sounds like you have a bit of joy about a conversation like that. And to me, it's all about attitude. If you want to sit down and have wine and engage in a conversation like that with me, I would be so blessed by that, because even these caller conversations that I'm having, I'm keeping notes to myself to be like, oh, got to research that, got to see what I believe about that, got to engage with that thought, because I'm not usually challenged in this specific way, and I would welcome that challenge. But to Puck's point, I really do believe it should only be for funsies, because when it becomes too heavy and too deep, and who's going to hell or who's an idiot because they're a theist, then it just gets dark and dirty and does end up feeling just like that game of checkers that no one's, like, someone potentially won, but no one went home happy. So I just wanted to give you accolades and credit for the attitude at which you're engaging in those conversations. And I hope you have excellent friends that do that with you, because that's awesome.
All right. Thank you, Keith, very much for calling. We got to move on to we got two more, and let's see if we can get them in before the show ends. So, All right. And you know what, Barbara? These are actually both for you. So let's see if we can do some rapid
It's
fire.
Brenda.
Brenda, I'm sorry. And the reason I said that is because this next caller is Barbara from
Fair.
Wisconsin.
Fair,
So I was looking at the name. Barbara, you're on with Brenda and Puck. What's your question?
Well, hi, Puck. Hi, Brenda.
Hi.
A couple questions. Brenda, what you mentioned first, that Jesus was perfect and that he was all-knowing, right? Did I understand you to say that?
I don't know if I said all-knowing. I'm actually not sold on that idea, but I do believe he is a manifestation of God. But maybe only with limited human capabilities. I don't know. I don't know about omnipotence or, you know.
Okay, so I mean, I was Catholic, went to Catholic school 12 years, and the reason I questioned what you said, because we were told that, well, he was born of a human being because his role here was to be a human and be a human sacrifice to help forgive human sins. So then he wouldn't be all-knowing. And if he was all-knowing, there wouldn't have been a Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And this is the way I see it. And again, I'm on a journey and I'm totally open to my goal in life is to be like 87 and people will be like, she was wise and she never stopped learning. I want to learn something new the day before I die. So I'm keeping that posture of openness, hopefully, to God that I do. But right now, the way I see it is that divinity, whatever word you want to give to that, whatever it is, manifested in a human body to have a human experience, to engage with us in this way. And I don't believe it was for this forgiveness of sins as much as to be a blueprint and to show us how to engage with this reality and all of the complications that we come up against, including death. Like he went through everything from birth to death, and a horrific one at that, to be this example of God on earth, showing us how to do it and how to do it well. So I see him as perfect in that way, the perfect representation of how to move through the world with absolute love, in that absolute clarity, the absolute clarity of oneness with God and understanding the divinity inside of him. I truly believe that he was excellent in that way and that he had a grasp on things that we didn't in that way. But I totally agree with you that I feel that if God did manifest in a human's body, that would mean the restrictions of a human body, pooping, for example, and also along with that, the not knowing everything, not knowing the answer. I believe he had to engage in curiosity too. So yeah, thank you, Barbara. But and you're making me engage on how I think of it, but that's what I believe. Today, mark it down, April 30th, 2021.
Yeah, next week on Truth Wanted, did Jesus go number 2?
I believe that he did.
And one other short thing was, again, going back to, like you were saying, he was engaging in it with humans, etc. So then the fact that you're uncertain that he was all-knowing, would that be the reason why he never said stop owning slaves and human beings as property? Do you think?
I mean, yeah, that's a really good question too, because one of the biggest discussions I get in with dissenting voices that are evangelical or that are conservative, that don't want to progress and move with us, are these ideas that the Bible is incredibly fallible in the things that it didn't explicitly call out because it wasn't capable of doing so, because it was written and it did reside in this very specific time. And this is more of a journey that I had with Paul, more so than Jesus, because Paul has what we call those clobber verses that conservative people or Christians in general will use to clobber LGBTQ people, will use to silence women. And I didn't see the same sort of clobbering effect in Jesus's words. I always saw love and the manifestation of truth. But with Paul, I saw major fallibilities and flaws. So when I engaged with that topic, I had more clarity when I read theologians who described that time and that era, because even right now, I can't speak to whatever might be relevant in the year 3000. And to answer your question, no, I don't believe that the authors of the Bible had that capability either. They didn't foresee social media. They didn't foresee the imperative to call out certain things. Jesus, I don't know, like, I wish he had said explicitly that homosexuality in a loving consensual relationship is good. And I don't know why that's not in there. And these are all just questions that you do wrestle with, and that do give you pause and can be very upsetting when you engage with the material of the Bible. But like I said earlier too, I do have such a deep distrust in the translation, and not because of paranoia, but because of the way I've seen the Bible weaponized and the way I've seen translation sometimes be intentionally mistranslated by people. And that always gives me pause to be like, do we even have the accurate account of what was said and what was done? And did Jesus engage in different ways that are just not on that page? Or all the women that were the first at the tomb, we don't have a book of their experience. What did they hear? What kind of experience did they have? And unfortunately, it's not represented in that text. And I think that's a terrible tragedy.
Well, we got to get this wrapped up, but thank you very much, Barbara, for the call, and I hope you got a good answer for that. We have one last call and not a lot of time to take it, so let's take, here's Sven. Hang on. Here's Sven from Washington. What's your question for Brenda?
Hi. I just thought it'd be good for the audience to, if Brenda could highlight what's the most important thing that keeps her a Christian. I know for me, I am not an atheist because I do believe in an afterlife, and that's very important to me and my connection to loved ones. And so there's no empirical argument against an afterlife because it can't be proven or disproven. So I just wondered if Brenda has a strong answer on the one thing that keeps her in her faith.
Thank you, Sven. I love that too, even the nuance of believing in an afterlife. And yeah, I mean, it's beautiful to hear where everybody lands on these spectrums of belief. The only way that I've been describing it for a long, long time is that when I was a little girl, Jesus was the thing that resonated with me. I am fully aware that in my region of the world, this is also the figure that I was introduced to. But the name Yeshua in the original, and just when I engage with that name, when I meditate with thoughts of Yeshua, with Jesus, even when I'm talking about it right now, just all of my skin is tingling, and I just sense that divinity. I just really, 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 I really believe it. I truly believe that he exemplified what we are meant to be doing on this earth, that he has been misinterpreted and beaten down and abused in his death and in the aftermath, and in all of the misunderstandings about who he was and what he came here to do. But it's just so deeply resonant with me. I haven't been talked out of it in my whole life, and I don't know how I could be. I just feel it as profoundly as love and as inexplicably as love. It's just something that is inside of me. And with that, I have so much grace and compassion and understanding for people that don't feel that, because it's not something that could be taught. It's not something that could be understood. I have received phone calls, though, from friends who I have professed this to. And when they have certain moments in their life, not even necessarily traumatic, giving me the phone call and being like, it is Jesus. I felt it. I know it's happening, and then have crossed over into that belief system. And yeah, so I just have patience with everybody on that journey. I'm not out here trying to convince everybody that that is the thing, because I know just by the way I speak about it and when talking to other people, that not everyone has that deep resonance that I profess to have.
Sven, that answered the question for
Yeah,
you?
I think that's very beautiful. It did. Do I have time to pop one back to you that related to that, Puck?
I wish we did, but we're running out. But you know what? I'm going to be in
No
the Discord
worries.
afterwards, and you can always email us. And if you email us at truth@atheist-community.org, we will definitely make sure that it gets over to Brenda. You can keep the conversation going. And we're about to talk about some ways you can engage with Brenda on her own channels. So I wish we had time, but we got to keep moving on. Thank you very
Thank you
much,
so
Sven,
much.
for
Thank
calling.
you, Sven.
Well, what did you think?
I mean, that was amazing because it was so challenging and like nerve-wracking. And, you know, I feel like if I had questions ahead of time, I would have done my due diligence and research. But this is why conversations like this are so important, because I engage in the same evangelical arguments every single day of my life. And there's really nothing more refreshing and invigorating and challenging than talking in an atheist network to atheist people, because you've done your work, you've done your research, and it really challenges me in a way that is necessary to continue to do the work that I do, because I want to be powerful and effective in helping people live better lives and in helping people on their spiritual journey. And yeah, that's just how I feel. I'm just grateful to be here, and I'm sorry for the questions that I effed up for people. I did my best.
No, well, knowing that there are a number of conversations we had to put on hold and a number of conversations that are yet to have, where can people find you to have more of these conversations with you?
Yeah, so I am at God is Gray on most platforms. I got a TikTok, I got my YouTube, my Instagram, God is Gray, Grey. And then my book, On Her Knees, Memoir of a Prayerful Jezebel, is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and a lot of independent bookstores if you just Google it. And like I said, that work is very, very important to me, because although it is to deconstruct and tell people about purity culture, my experience, I really cast a wide net. I wanted to invite everyone in that experience, atheists, no matter what your belief system is. It's really just a tale of the evangelical hellscape, what I've been through, and a better pathway to sexual integrity, no matter what your religious lean or practice is.
Well, if you want to keep the conversation going on our end, there's a number of things you can do to support this show. One great way is to be a patron on Patreon. Go to our Patreon at patreon.com/truthwanted. Once again, every week we read out our patron of the week, along with some other great benefits that you can check out on that site. Also, if you really like our swag and our logo, you can get your own Truth Wanted merch from our merch store. I have the mask and I wear it every day. Okay, there we go. There's all our good stuff right there. Yeah, I just didn't want to be the guy who wore the band's shirt to the band's concert. We already know I'm a fan of Truth Wanted. I don't need to.
I should have sent you a God is Gray shirt. That would have been perfect. I got a God is Gray mask too.
You can support us here on YouTube by becoming a member. You can have access to cool emojis, and it greets you every time you come into our chat. So you can consider joining this channel for as little as 99 cents a month. If you can't do that, that's fine. You can still like, subscribe, and comment. Here's something we're starting new. This is a new YouTube channel that has all of the ACA shows in podcast form. It's called the AEN Podcast Network. There you go. You can get to a tiny.cc/AEN podcasts, where you can catch podcast versions of this show, Atheist Experience, and all the other Atheist Community of Austin properties. I will be coming on to Discord in just a couple of minutes here. So you can continue to engage with us there at tiny.cc/ACA Discord. And I would be completely remiss if I didn't remember my roots and say thank you to the wonderful crew who has been working behind the scenes to run the show. Hello. Oh, look at that. Look at it. I am being my orange soda is being represented, even though I'm on camera this week instead of on screen. And why are you playing video games? You should be on it. Just never mind. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Go ahead and give us our parting thoughts here. What have the last word here?
I don't know. I love you guys. I love you, and I'm just grateful for the experience. And just like Jesus, I have to pee.
Well, thank you, everybody. And as always, I'm going to botch the closer. As always, keep wanting the truth. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, no.